Kothari to please come up on the dais. Dr. Vidita Kothari is the founder and director of the Central Lab, Madhya Pradesh. I request you to introduce Dr. Prakash Manchanda to the audience.
Yeah, sorry, can I start now? No, I don't think so. Thank you.
So it's a privilege to introduce Dr. Manchanda. He's a veterinary doctor who did his IIM, and then he's the CEO or MD of Lal Path Lab. So the biggest lab of India as far as commercial definition is concerned. The largest number of pickup points, collection centers and lab. So it would be very nice to hear points of his, few minutes of his journey, and then we want it to be an interactive session. We have a lot of queries for you. How did you reach that?
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Vinita, and good afternoon, everyone. I have 20 minutes, right? Yes. So as she said that she wants to have more interactive sessions, so we can probably, I'll speak for 10 minutes and we can have 10 minutes of Q&A. As the topic is a little broad, so I don't know where to start. I just thought I'll quickly, the flavor of this presentation is going to be less technical, more in terms of industry, structure, etc. As she rightly said that a little bit of commercial flavor you will get in this presentation. First is, I think healthcare as an industry. I know, how many of you are lab owners and how many are clinicians here? If lab owners can raise hands, or not too many. Clinicians, I think everybody is a clinician here. Okay, it doesn't really matter. So I think first point that I really want to make is that healthcare as an industry, from a commercial standpoint, has a long way to go in India. This is one data which recently came in newspaper. It's an official published data that India spends, and I have actually quoted FY 2018 because that's how the exact numbers are. India has spent 3.3% on GDP, 3.3% of GDP on healthcare. Now this number, if you look at it in contrast with similar countries versus Western world, this is too small a figure. And if you look at Russia, China, South Africa, which are comparable countries to India, they are spending more than 5%, and Brazil even more than close to 9.5%. And developed countries are spending more than 10%. So a country which has a very fast-growing economy, 1.3 billion people, if you just put it all together, this is actually going to be much bigger opportunity than what we see today. That's the first message I wanted to give all of you. Second is, as I am representing diagnostics, while Dr. Vinita said that we are the largest player in the country, but you will actually be surprised that there is not even a single player today in the country which has more than 5% market share. So even we are still not there. We are the largest company, but we are still not at 5% market share. So what does it tell you? It tells you that diagnostic space is highly fragmented space. So there are lots and lots of players. So it offers further opportunity to build scale and build a large organization. The second thing, while there are too many things on this chart, but there are multiple delivery formats of diagnostics that are emerging. In the past, at least I was aware about single labs and chain labs the way we are, and also hospital-based labs. But in the last 2 years, one has seen emergence of all kinds of players like Tata 1mg, you have Healthian, you have Pharmacy. There are formats where everybody is trying to put e-pharmacy together, or whether e-consultations and things like that. So there are multiple delivery formats are emerging in the market. And it's a high growth rate market, 5 to $6 billion and growing at 13 to 14%. This point I have actually covered, but I think traditionally many players or many actors in this space were always focused on inside the lab. But today the pressure in the industry is building on the service side. I heard the earlier two presentation, looks like speed is the name of the game. Actually, it's happening everywhere. Who can deliver it fast? It's like fastest finger first. And diagnostic is not behind. Everybody wants the report, and some people even want the report before the sample is given. So it's as fast as possible. I think as rightly somebody said that without diagnostics, medicine is a little bit, quite a bit handicapped. 5% of the value, but 95% of downstream costs are determined by this 5%. If you get it right, you can favorably impact 90%. If you don't get it right, you have a problem. So that means significance of diagnostics is huge, and it's often said that 70% of medical decisions are based on diagnostics. There are multiple factors which are driving growth, but I think if I look at a macro level, as I mentioned in my first chart, a fastest growing economy, large economy, which is I think 4th or 5th largest economy in the world, and still spends much less on healthcare. There's a lot to offer later, and there are many factors which are there. I won't get into details just to save time for Q&A. I also mentioned that it is now not only just the testing alone, it's the service side of the business which is actually gaining a lot of significance. So you need to have a quality diagnostics, but also as fast as possible if you can deliver the report. I'll spend a couple of minutes here. I think this links to probably the Q&A that will be there as to how did we build all this, such a large setup. I think the key ingredient to this success is essentially a business model. The business model in management jargon is usually called hub and spoke model, where hubs are your testing centers and spokes are your collection centers. Commercially, what it does is that if you just think, if you have a lab and you are a doctor sitting there, a pathologist, and you don't have these collection centers, let's say you have a walk-in 100, 150, 200. Now what happens after a point in time? It saturates. You don't have more people coming in because it gets overcrowded. People tend to go away to another lab, and your catchment area is just about a kilometer and a half. But now you want to expand your market. Now the only way you can expand is either you open more and more labs like that, which some people have tried, but that really replicates a very high cost structure. It becomes very difficult to manage because if you are only operating as one lab, everything is happening under your nose. But if you are operating more labs, then you are actually losing control of what's going on. And that's where this whole management systems come in as to how you really remotely manage the quality of various centers that you have. And on the commercial side, instead of replicating labs, you then replicate collection points. So what needs to happen is that I actually don't need to see a patient, I just need to get a patient sample. So for me, the patient actually gets captured in a tube. So that's how we manage the entire network of collection centers and labs, and this is called hub and spoke model. This model actually has helped not only Dr. Lal Path Labs, but in the recent last couple of decades that I have been in this industry, we've actually been able to go to every nook and corner of the country. And this study was conducted by PwC, where they came out and they found that remotest of villages in the country today do have access to at least a collection center of one of these chain labs, which is a great achievement Diagnostics has got. Now, it's just a scenario where how life of a patient's changed. In 2005, when I joined this space, patients will come to a lab in the morning, and then they'll keep calling during the day whether my report is ready or not, and then they'll come physically again to the lab to collect the report. And sometimes some of the patients actually will go back without the report because it's not ready, then they'll come back next day morning. Now just imagine in the entire process you're losing out a complete day. You lose out on travel costs, you lose out, you probably have to take a day off. So that was a scenario. Today, actually the person doesn't need to come to the lab. You actually book your test online, you pay online, you can actually ask for a home collection, you can pick a slot which is convenient to you. A phlebotomist will come home and collect the sample, and the report is actually on your mobile phone. And not only the report for the sample that you gave yesterday or today, but also for the last 8-10 years. Like on our app, you can actually see all the reports that you got yourself tested for so many years with us. Not only that, but you can also have it for all your family members together. So it's all data which is lying in one place. So you just see how the whole business actually changed in the last 10-15 years. So that's the example where mobile apps have come in, home collection things are happening. The other thing that I have actually seen in the last 15 years I've been here is that the test menu actually has dramatically gone up. And I think our labs today are actually as good as any other global lab in the world. And test menu actually has gone up from 3,500, 4,500 tests, and more will keep adding. We've actually got a lot of machines with us, and that's the overall change which this industry is seeing. And I have also seen that accreditation, number of labs which are accredited also going up, but it's still a drop in the ocean. And just about 1% of the labs are accredited in the country. There's a long way to go. If there are some people sitting from NABL here in this room, I think we just need to really probably move very fast. And I was in Mumbai yesterday, and I was in Bangalore yesterday, and I was asking somebody that is NABL actually making a big difference? Answer is big yes. Today, a lot of customers actually want to know whether your lab is NABL accredited or not. I think kudos to the entire effort which has gone on quality, that there is a lot of awareness about quality reports. And I think COVID has helped to some extent, because people have realized there are some good labs and not so good labs, because all labs are not doing RT-PCR. So I think quality will also move very fast in times to come. I think nutshell, what I have noticed that in the last 15 years, most prices have gone up, but you will be actually pleasantly surprised the price of diagnostic tests actually are coming down. And one of the reasons behind this is because of building scale. More you test through a lab or an entire ecosystem, your cost of testing goes down, and you have the ability to pass on that price to the customer. In fact, I'm sure some of us would have experienced that RT-PCR test in India is just about $500-600, and I actually had gone to Maldives recently. There I had to pay $150. So I told this guy, listen, I run the largest diagnostic company in India. It just costs not even $10, and you're charging $150. He says you may be king there, but here you have to pay $150. So a lot of people actually, I have friends who live in the US, who live in UK, they come to India, they actually get their complete health checkup done. They say this will cost them $300-400. Here it's just about $20-30, you're all done. So I have just got a chart which says that if the pricing index for India is 1 and USA is 8.2. So you can imagine something that costs you $100 here, in India it will be 18, in the US it will be 800. New Zealand 2.1, Kenya 3.9, and Rwanda 2.5. So I think, so that's what I briefly want to talk about. So we have close to 7 minutes with us. I think you have some question. Maybe I want to trigger something in you so that you can ask me. Maybe last 5 minutes I will leave it for Q&A. Some of you may be interested in knowing how do you really build business of, whether it's a pathology or in general any other business. I think I've just put on some of my learnings, as it said about my journey of as CEO and now Managing Director of Dr. Lal Path Labs. I think the first message I want to give it to all of you is, if you have desire to build a large enterprise, is that you must dream big and think big. Because it all actually starts with an ambition. It just doesn't happen on its own. So if it's just in your mind, you will just start thinking big. Then comes acting big, because just I think many of us carry desires, but they only happen for people who really eventually end up acting on it. Scale actually has a huge advantage across industries. I have multiple industries experience, so it is in healthcare as well. Scale benefits all stakeholders. Actually, the first stakeholder is the patient itself, because it makes the entire, because you have a lot of kitty available to spend on various areas. Of course, the first thing to start is the quality, because you have to put yourself in consumer shoes, and for us, the consumer is patient. I think the first thing is quality. Then it has to become affordable, because if you have a quality but it's out of somebody's reach, it has no meaning, right? So you need to make sure that quality care that you provide to your patient has to be affordable. In these two areas lies the answer, which is scale. If you don't build scale, you will not be able to actually move up on this ladder. Third is creating brand awareness. I think that's one area I find in healthcare is lacking. You must build a brand. And somehow I find a lot of passion is there to use your own name, but I think you use a name which is not related to a person, but try and build a name which will outlast any individual. Build a strong and capable team. This is one message I want to give to all of you, is that in my mind, every doctor is an entrepreneur. That's how you start, because you compete for patients coming in, and you create a brand pool, a lot of people come in, and I have seen some people have more OPD, some people have less, but what is the reason for that? Because there is a brand which is being created. But at every stage, you require a different skill set. Now, an entrepreneur, a startup entrepreneur is very different than somebody who scales organization. So please remember that the skill that you require in the early stage of business are not the skills which will help you as you are growing fast. If you are learning, acquiring new skills, wonderful. But if you continue to think that, I'm going to be using the same skill that I used 10 years back, it's not going to work. So you have to build your team and learn to delegate. And if you continue to put your hands in everything, I'm afraid that you will be able to really grow it fast. Invest in technology, because these days a lot of tech stuff is happening. You must get that. And finally, execution is mantra of success. You must operationally very savvy, very hands-on on converting ideas into reality. I think this was my last chart, so it gives us about 3.5 minutes, 4 minutes to Q&A.
Like you heard previous two lectures where they said that it is very important to have clinico-pathological discussion. Now in all the corporate labs, the B2B business and the things which are done, how do you ensure that? Because it's only then the values. It is no direct connect with. Sometimes we even don't know who the doctor is sending to that particular application.
I think it's a great question. In my view, in the last sort of 1 decade, a lot of time has been spent on scaling businesses, some of these chain labs. I think to me the time has come now to really segment these businesses. And the pressure on the labs is going to be, how are you different from someone else? And that differentiation essentially comes by connecting with your customer. I think if you notice one of the chart, it says, put yourself in the consumer shoes. One line said that. And the consumer or customer for us is, let's say, one side is a clinician, another side is a patient. Now, patient is putting pressure on us on service, but the clinician is putting on the pressure of a great quality interface between clinician and the pathology lab, right? That's what you're probably asking. In my view, you will actually see segmentation happening in pathology. I think over lunch I was discussing with Dr. Prakash. He has an idea that these autoimmune disorders and, let's say, infertility, that cohort requires a different kind of interaction. Histopathology, now we do a lot of remote histopathology slide reading, that requires a different kind of discussion. And molecular requires different kind of discussion. And I think I heard about microbiology session, that requires different kind of discussion. So you will actually see that small groups coming together. and trying to see that can we create pillars of these differentiation. So I am very sure next 5 years you will see a lot of such area happening where center of excellence appearing in each of these verticals.
So I have a question. Out of exactly what we wanted to hear from you. First of all, thank you so much. Uh, uh, there are two questions which we can combine together. We have been observing the journey of your
Dr. Lal,
organization. Yes. Initially we have seen state-wise growth. Like predominantly, I remember way back in 2004-5, and now state-wise, we have seen each lab, or each strong regional player has different challenges in different states. Like in Kerala, there is a different challenge with labor, or in MP, where madam is there are different challenges. So how have you experienced it, and if you can summarize in quickly about how your organization has seen it and tackled with it. And number two, when we start, say, hub and spoke model, it will be either greenfield, brownfield, or acquisitions, or possibly HLMs as your charge, hospital-based labs.
Yeah.
So if some of them out of 100, like we see, maybe 2 to 3 may not do well. So what are the turnkeys for them to do well, or how do you, as an organization, look at those?
I think the first thing, if you trace the journey of Dr. Lal Path Labs, we have primarily grown by organic ways. Organic means you actually open your own labs, which is the term which is used as greenfield labs. Now, in any service industry, of course, it's true for all industries, but especially for service as well, whether it's banking, whether it is hospital or any retail chain, you will see that ability to grow in contiguous market is easier than when you go far away from your core area. If a lab is operating, let's say, out of Kochi, now its ability to grow in Trivandrum will be more than, let's say, you want to open a lab in Delhi. So if you want to do it organically. And that's a global experience also. If you trace the journey of Quest and LabCorp in the US, that's how they've actually grown. So for us also same thing happened, because we grew out of Delhi, and then first protocol for us was essentially Delhi NCR. Then we went to rest of North, and then suddenly we found that we are lopsided towards northern part of India. We of course made a lot of effort to grow in eastern India, and then we went to slightly west. But then we realized it's not going to be easy for us to grow in rest of South and especially Western India. And then we brought in our inorganic strategy. In Kochi, we actually acquired a lab. In Mumbai, recently we acquired Suburban Diagnostics, some of you may be aware. So our strategy right now is to actually continue to drive organic growth in strong markets. And there are white patches or white spaces that we have identified. We are looking for inorganic. But inorganic does not mean the effort stops. Actually, effort begins after you acquire, because you have to grow it organically. So, but our footprint that we are widening by inorganic and organic both. I hope that answers the question. Yes, sir. Sorry, you will have to, I know she's getting a little restless in terms of time. Just maybe last question? Okay.
I'll ask.
Okay.
It was an extension of Vinita's question. Because as a medical teacher, we teach them that treat the patient, not the report.
Right.
And what this whole concept is going treating the reports. I think there should be some introduction in the system or in the technology for a better communication, what she's asking. That was my question.
No, I think it's an excellent point which is coming across. In fact, we had Nat Health conference recently in Delhi. One of the pathologists actually stood up and mentioned that report in isolation is not a diagnosis. And I heard that in the earlier presentation as well, that it's a diagnosis has to be made by a clinician, not by the report. The report only aids it, right? And I'm also seeing a pattern now in the whole diagnostics where in the past, if an event has taken place, you are trying to find out what happened. But now you are not going to wait for the event to take place. You are actually trying to find out will it ever happen based on your genetic makeup. If answer is yes, if you have some of these risk factors that you carry, what can you do about it, and when is it likely to happen? So actually the whole pressure on time has become so much that now it's becoming more predictive diagnosis. So I buy your point that it has to be together, it can't be in isolation. Thank you.
Can I ask you one more question?
Sorry, you have to ask the, I am actually okay.
Last question.
Thank you for a good presentation. I have seen the growth of lab paths from 1975 onwards, from Diagnostics.
Okay.
My question here is, now you have lots of collection centers. How do you ensure the quality and integrity of the samples in the transportation?
I think it's a question which probably I can spend half a day on this, but that's precisely the point, because it has to be calibrated expansion. You can't be all over the place. It has a lot to do with the entire cold chain logistics, etc. It has to do with a lot of internal systems of auditing these places. Like you have NABL for the labs, we actually have even auditors sitting inside our own company which is auditing this whole thing. We actually have a franchisee management tool which really monitors them on a real-time basis. And technology has further helped us to know as to who is sitting on the collection center on a daily basis. So I'll stop here given the time constraint, but it's a brilliant question, because that's the spine of this entire operation. We need to take care of it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm sure you can catch Dr. Manchanda.
Yeah, I'm here till 5, so you can catch hold of me.
You can discuss further about it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Manchanda.
Thank you.